good morning, everyone. I want to thank everybody for coming out, all the media, all the public, and today we hopefully can speak for the public in the state of Wisconsin. And I'm State Senator Dave Hansen, and thank you all for being here. I think it was back in December of 2012 when I brought forth the first redistricting bill, and we have never ever given up, and the public gets it now. Representative Vining and I are pleased to be joined here today by Matt Rothschild, with the director of the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, Erin Grunze, of the executive director of the League of Women Voters, former state senator and chairman of Common Cause, Wisconsin former Senator Tim Collen, and I serve with Tim. He's done a great job with this project, and of course Sachin Chheda, the director of the Fair Elections Project. So there are a lot of people. What's that?
No.
No, correct it.
You're good. You're good.
Okay. Chheda? Chheda?
Perfect.
There's my pronunciation. Okay, back to the real story. We'll let him pronounce his own name later. I'd like to start by saying something that I wasn't sure I would be able to, given the fierce opposition to our redistricting bills in the past. And that is to say that the number of Republican sponsors is growing. We now have 3 Republican senators on our bill, Representative Novak, Representative Tranau, and just recently up in Door County, Representative Kitchens. And he added his name as a sponsor to the bill. So we've gone from 1 to 3. And some cynical people might say that they caved to public pressure. But I think that they're listening to their constituents finally. So I want to take a moment to applaud their courage for taking a stand that I know is not popular with their leadership in Madison. As someone who has gone against my party's leadership from time to time, I know how difficult that can be. So thank you, Representative Novak, Representative Tranau, and Representative Kitchens. But I also want to thank the people here and around the state who not only support nonpartisan redistricting and Representative Vining's and my bill, but who have chosen to stand up and fight for fair and competitive elections. It is because of your efforts that we now have what we could call truly a bipartisan bill. And I don't need to go into the entire history of what's happened here in Wisconsin. We all know what happened back in 2011 that gave the Republicans obviously a decided advantage in legislative and congressional elections. The new boundaries they drew were so far beyond the pale that Wisconsin is considered to be one of the most gerrymandered states in the nation. In fact, when I made my statement back a few years ago, PolitiFact said mostly true, because I said we're number 1, they said we could be number 2 or 3 worst in the country. But I'll stand with that mostly true on PolitiFact. Their gerrymander was so far out of bounds that a federal panel of 3 judges, 2 of which were appointed by Republican presidents, declared the current maps unconstitutional.
That's right.
And unfortunately, and not surprisingly, the U.S. Supreme Court recently decided that it should not weigh in on redistricting, saying instead that this is an issue that should be decided by the states. Justice Roberts, you were wrong on this. You should have made a decision that it would have been for our whole country, but he didn't. So here we are today. So now it is up to us to continue our efforts to make nonpartisan redistricting the law of the land here in Wisconsin. We can no longer count on anyone else to do it for us. If we want fair and competitive elections, we all must do the work. We must reach out to our families, our friends, our neighbors, and get them involved, and use the growing support for nonpartisan redistricting to convince more and more Republicans here in Madison to join us. So contact them all and get them to support this great piece of legislation. When I first introduced this legislation, as I mentioned some years ago, 2012, I knew this would be an uphill fight. Hardly anyone talked of or knew about what redistricting even was. but the times have changed. Now, thanks to the efforts of the people you see here and around the state, not only do people know what it is, they know how wrong, how totally wrong gerrymandering is, and they want it to stop. 48 counties have passed resolutions supporting our effort, and 8 more counties approved referendums in support. County boards in 32 of the 33 state Senate districts and in 91 of the 99 assembly districts have all now passed resolutions in support of this nonpartisan redistricting proposal. So support for ending partisan gerrymandering comes from all over the state, in red counties as well in blue counties. So you get these decisions by county boards and referendums, yet they make the mistake of voting for the very people that are against it. That has to change.
Yes.
Overall, 72% of the people in our state, Democrats, independents, Republicans alike, support our cause. And I think we will see the number of sponsors from the other side of the aisle continue to grow. I don't think what we're seeing today in our elections, including from gerrymandering to unlimited flow of dark money to voter suppression, is what our founding fathers had in mind when they declared our independence from England and wrote the Constitution. I don't think our forefathers and all those servicemen and women who gave their lives and sacrificed so much did so to defend a nation where democracy is nothing but an obstacle that stands between the people and politicians who'd rather serve, sadly, their special interests than do what's best for all of us. And I think they would look at how far out of whack things have gotten, and they would be the first to call for change, just as over 70% of the people of the state are now doing. It's past time, way past time. I remember back in 2012, I brought it forward. There was a Republican senator who said, it might be a good idea, but it's too soon. Now they would argue it's too late. The time is right, the time is now. So it's past time for both sides to come together, do the right thing, pass a nonpartisan redistricting law that will give the people of the state the type of elections they deserve: fair, transparent, and, as importantly, competitive. Our legislation, Senate Bill 288 and Assembly Bill 303, do just that by truly reforming the redistricting process in a way that provides transparency, fairness, and competitiveness in our elections that will restore accountability to our government. We need redistricting reform now. The people of this state deserve it. Our democracy depends on it, and taking the politics out of redistricting reform is needed if we are to restore the people's faith in their government and end the polarization in Madison. It's a return to our democracy. One person, one vote. May you never, ever forget that. Now it's my honor to introduce to you my co-author and colleague on this very, very important bill, Representative Robyn Vining.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here today. I am State Representative Robyn Vining. I represent the 14th District, the people of the 14th District, including Wauwatosa, Brookfield, and Milwaukee. We are here today to amplify the voices of people calling for fair maps for the people. We're here today with urgency following the Supreme Court decision. Our only fix to partisan gerrymandering will come now from the legislature. After it was removed from the budget, my colleagues and I introduced legislation to create a nonpartisan redistricting commission. It is important that this legislation be bipartisan, and I want to acknowledge the partnership of our 3 Republican co-sponsors today. Thank you. Wisconsinites. Wisconsinites have a constitutional right to be fairly represented by their elected officials, regardless of their political affiliation. We were reminded of the power of partisan gerrymandering with the 2018 election. Assembly Democrats received 200,000 more votes than Assembly Republicans statewide, and yet, In the state assembly, the divide stands at 63 Republicans and 36 Democrats. Now, I've spent the last 6 months in this building welcoming fourth graders, and I guarantee you if I walked into the assembly and stood in front of the fourth graders and told them that one party, regardless of party affiliation, received 200,000 more votes than the other party, but only about half of the seats in the state assembly, the room would grow loud with angry fourth graders crying of injustice, and that would happen very quickly. And this would be true whether the numbers swayed to the Republicans or the Democrats. Either way, that's not fair representation. The fourth graders would quickly tell you, in that scenario, each vote does not have the same value. Fourth graders know it, and you and I know it. One person, one vote, and every vote the same value. We talk a lot around here about the will of the people is the law of the land. It's inscribed on the ceiling of the governor's conference room. But partisan gerrymandering puts this Wisconsin value, this very important Wisconsin value, in danger, because when people aren't represented, their issues aren't represented. And I'll say that again, when people are not represented, their issues are not represented. For example, the public overwhelmingly supports Medicaid expansion. 70% of Wisconsinites support Medicaid expansion, but those views are not represented in the majority of the Wisconsin state legislature. The will of the people is being blocked. In short, why are we not expanding Medicaid? Partisan gerrymandering. And so we are here today because we are committed to nonpartisan redistricting reform and will continue to advocate for fair and representative legislative maps. Partisan gerrymandering is wrong when Democrats do it, and it's wrong when Republicans do it. 72% of Wisconsinites have spoken broadly across parties and 48 counties and have passed resolutions demanding fair mapping. And as I've said it over and over again, voters should not get to choose voters should get to choose their politicians. Politicians should not get to choose their voters. The time has come for the politicians to listen to the people. Our state motto is forward. But we must move forward with fairness. Every vote deserves the same value. As a state representative, I took an oath, and an oath I take seriously. I am not here to draw maps to protect my job. I am here to draw maps to protect the will of the people of Wisconsin. It is my job to protect the will of the people, and that is precisely our mission with the Fair Maps legislation. The will of the people is the law of the land. The voice of the people is the heart of our state, and every vote deserves equal value. Now, we must act. Call your legislators. Call on them to sign on to this bill. It is already bipartisan. This is not a partisan issue. We cannot let this be a partisan issue. This is about Wisconsin values, Wisconsin fairness. Call your legislators and ask them to sign on. Excuse me. This bill is bipartisan, and it deserves a public hearing. Let's give this bill the hearing it deserves. Thank you. And with that, I'm going to introduce former State Senator Tim Collen.
Thank you very much, Representative Vining, and thanks to her and to Senator Hansen for taking this fight forward again. The thing that I want to mention right away is several key points have been made. There's no reason to repeat them. Is that gerrymandering very clearly is not a partisan issue. It just depends on what state you're in. Gerrymandering is an abuse of power. When one party has all the power, they can't help themselves. They abuse it. Republicans in Wisconsin, Michigan, and North Carolina, Democrats in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Maryland. It only looks partisan in any particular state, but the issue is the abuse of power. I could talk a lot about all the things that really make gerrymandering bad for the public, but to me, one of the most central things is the election results in November are decided when the maps are drawn. It's not, the election doesn't matter. So the November election doesn't matter, the August primary matters. And how do you avoid a primary? You stick with a team. You don't ever become a moderate. You get called that, you get a primary. Don't be called a compromiser. That's how you get a primary. So stick with the team, don't work with the other side, and the public sits out there and says, why can't they get along up there? Why can't they get along in Washington or in Madison? Well, you go right back to gerrymandering as a key factor. We haven't said much about the Iowa plan. A lot of people are familiar with it. The politicians don't draw the maps. The important thing about the Iowa plan began in 1980 under Republican control of the Iowa legislature and governorship. It is so popular in Iowa that in the last 40 years, not one legislator of either party has ever introduced a bill to change it. That's how popular it is in Iowa, and we aren't that far from Iowa. I believe that we pass this and get it into law. There won't be any attempts to change it here. One of the other consequences I just want to mention of the 2018 election is that in both houses, in both parties, every single incumbent was reelected in 2018. The only exception being the situation up in the 1st District where the incumbent won a special in June and then lost in November. Other than that, every incumbent, both parties, both houses. Now either, and I hope I don't offend anyone here, but either we had the most brilliant, most qualified, most talented, most hardworking legislature in the history of Wisconsin, or the answer was gerrymandering. And I think maybe it's both. How's that? So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be here on behalf of Common Cause and the 4,000 members in this state and hundreds of thousands and more across the nation. This is an issue that we cannot let go away. We cannot let the Supreme Court stop us. And this is going to be a fight in 2021 if they don't pass this Iowa-type plan in Wisconsin. So I sure hope that it happens. I sure hope those 3 Republicans who have co-authored it, which is the brave thing to do to go against your party, as Senator Hansen said, I hope that number can quadruple and whatever 8 times is. And so thank you very much. And it's now my privilege to introduce Erin Grunze, the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin.
Thank you. As Tim Collen said, I'm Erin Grunze, the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin. The League of Women Voters of Wisconsin has advocated for nonpartisan redistricting for decades. Over these decades, the control of the legislature has teetered between the 2 major parties. The response from the party in power has always been to accuse the League of siding with the minority party and that the League is looking to push that party's agenda. The League has been accused of siding with Republicans and then siding with Democrats. But in fact, the League has always been looking out for the voters through our advocacy, the voters who are packed together or cracked apart because of gerrymandering. It's a problem with power. And when those in power can determine how they keep their power, we no longer have a representative democracy. Republican voters are cheated when Democrats gerrymander, like in Maryland. And Democratic voters are cheated when Republican politicians gerrymander, like here in Wisconsin. No party is innocent. Gerrymandering isn't a problem of one party. It's the partisan cling to power that damages the will of the voters and erodes our democracy. Voters should pick their elected officials, not the other way around. With our current system in Wisconsin, politicians draw their own district lines to pick their voters and lock in their political power. Yet there is a solution, and we will continue to fight. We have the bills introduced by Representative Vining and Senator Hansen that can make the process more open, more representative, and more transparent by taking the redistricting process from the partisans and moving it to an independent and nonpartisan redistricting advisory commission. There is bipartisan support because this is a solution that is right for democracy, and Wisconsin voters across the political spectrum want to see this change. And now is the time for the nonpartisan redistricting bills SB 288 and AB 303 to get a public hearing and deserve serious consideration by lawmakers in Wisconsin, as we expect the representatives we elect to be held accountable to the public's unified call for reforms. Elections should be determined by voters, not the politicians who draw the maps. Thank you. Of introducing Matthew Rothschild, the Executive Director of the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign, and his map.
Thank you, Erin. I first want to thank every citizen for coming today. It is the citizen activism in Wisconsin that has really brought this issue forward. So keep up with your activism and get your friends involved, and we're going to get this done. We're going to ban gerrymandering in Wisconsin. I want to thank Senator Hansen for all his heroic leadership on this issue for years and years. A true leader, a true champion. I want to thank Representative Vining, who's holding up this sign with me. For taking on this urgent issue so early in her career. I want to thank the other legislators behind me who are supporting this. I want to thank the 3 Republican legislators who are co-sponsoring. Todd Novak of Dodgeville has been with us for a while. Representative Kitchens and Tranell are new, and I thank them for their courage and their foresight. And I say foresight because this issue is coming, and they're wise to get in front of it. Because any elected official in this state who doesn't come around to banning gerrymandering in Wisconsin is going to risk losing his or her seat. That's how powerful this momentum is for banning gerrymandering in Wisconsin. The Marquette Law School poll that was referenced earlier this press conference came out earlier this year, showed that 72% of Wisconsinites, as you heard, want to ban gerrymandering in Wisconsin. But what you didn't hear was that 63% of Republicans want to ban gerrymandering in Wisconsin. And 76% of independents want to ban gerrymandering in Wisconsin. The people of Wisconsin are simply sick and tired of a rigged political system. It doesn't matter to them whether Republicans are rigging it or Democrats are rigging it. They don't want any more rigging of the political system in Wisconsin. They want fair play in Wisconsin. And to give you an illustration of how bipartisan this issue is, look at this map. 47 counties in Wisconsin have passed county board resolutions to ban gerrymandering in Wisconsin. They're not 47 blue counties in Wisconsin. They're not 37 blue counties in Wisconsin. They're not 27 blue counties in Wisconsin. They're not 20 blue counties in Wisconsin. 47 counties passed this. A lot of these counties are red, red, red counties. But even in red, red, red counties, the people of those counties want to ban gerrymandering in Wisconsin. Iowa got this thing done 40 years ago. We can get it done in Wisconsin. And you know, we're falling behind other states too. Just in the last year, Colorado, Michigan, Missouri, and Utah voted to ban gerrymandering in their states. Do we really want to fall further behind Missouri and Utah? I don't think so. We need to ban gerrymandering in Wisconsin once and for all. We need to get a democracy in Wisconsin where there's fair play. We need to get a democracy in Wisconsin where everyone has an equal voice. Thank you very much. It's now my honor to introduce Sachin Chheda, the director of the Fair Maps Project, who's done so much to bring a coalition together to fight on this issue. Sachin.
Thanks so much to everyone for being here, to the media, to the legislators, to the leadership across the aisle.
We are at a unique moment in American politics, and I think we all are watching the news every day. We're seeing how the president speaks to us and about us as Americans. Frankly, we see the leadership of the majority party in the legislature dividing Wisconsinites every day. The message is clear. Milwaukee and Madison's on one side, and the rest of Wisconsin is supposedly on the other. But this map gives lie to that, because the people of Wisconsin are actually united about what makes us strong. A strong university system, a strong transportation system, an economy where everyone can get ahead, an economy where everyone has access to health care. We may disagree about the details, but we know that together Wisconsin is always going to be stronger. And the division that is exacerbated by gerrymandering, when elections don't matter, as has been explained, when only the primary elections are the ones that count, means that we don't have the Wisconsin that we know and love. We don't have the America that we know and love. So this bipartisan movement across the country is paying dividends, right? The Democrats in New Jersey tried to pass a map rigging scheme, and people from both parties rose up and said no, that we're not going to let that happen anymore. It went to the ballot in the states that were just mentioned, in Utah, and Missouri, and Michigan, et cetera. People brought it to the ballot, people of both parties. And big money was spent, but citizen power overcame that big spending from corporations who want a rigged system. And they said, we want a fair system. That doesn't mean they won't elect Republicans sometimes, and they won't elect Democrats sometimes. But when we came together to bring the lawsuit in Wisconsin that has, I think, energized and reinvigorated this movement, and Bill Whitford is here. Bill, raise your hand. You're in the room somewhere. Hey, Bill. He was the lead plaintiff. Bill and I and many others were brought together by former State Representative Fred Kessler to confront the problem, not because we said we want to win for us. It was because we can see what's going to happen to Wisconsin if we go down this road of these rigged maps. And everything that we warned about has come true. Now, when we filed the lawsuit after 2 years of work, we knew it was a long shot. We knew that we were asking the Supreme Court to take a stand in a way that they hadn't taken a stand before. We got there in our case. The Rucho case got there, and unfortunately, we didn't get all the way there to get those justices to make a decision that they were going to set that standard. But the goal that we set out, and you can look back at the press conference, you can look back at the video on Wisconsin Eye, is we said we were going to raise awareness of this issue, and we were going to make it resonant to the public. And I just want to ask anyone in the media or anyone who's an observer of politics that if you knew we were introducing a redistricting bill in 2019, that the room would be full, and that there'd be 8 cameras here, and that the public would be paying attention. I would have told you were crazy. You would have told you were crazy. And we've actually changed the dynamic. We've changed the dynamic around this issue because we've come together, 15 organizations strong in the Wisconsin Fair Maps Coalition. Now, I know that the criticism will be, well, how are you going to get it passed? Because even though we have a handful of Republicans who've stood up and said they're going to sponsor this or vote for this, we know that the leader is dependent upon rigged maps to stay in power, right? We know the speaker is, we know the majority leader is. They wouldn't be in power, the map tells us so, if it weren't for rigged maps. In fact, in federal court, we proved that it wasn't just because people were packed into certain places. They always want to say there's these 2 blue counties, right? Dane and Milwaukee. But mathematically, scientifically, the evidence showed that people are actually spread all throughout Wisconsin, that the bias towards Republicans in the geography is only about 2%. So it doesn't explain a 13% efficiency gap in the map. It's a lie. They lie to you because they want to keep us divided. And it is Republican and Democratic constituents, independent constituents, those who swing back and forth, who are all not served by a political system in which general elections don't count. I've got a lot of friends behind me here, but I'll tell you, they're all in pretty safe districts. Almost every single one of them. I know, Robyn, maybe you're probably not in the safest Janet shaking her head. Okay, Representative Bewley. But most of them are. And the fact is that their willingness to respond to constituents is dependent on goodwill. They just want to do it. They don't have to do it. Legislators of both parties in Wisconsin no longer have to respond to their constituents. They just have to focus on what the party line is. And it's made our politics work less well. It means that we have a university system that's falling behind. It means we have a transportation system that's falling behind. It means we have an economy that's creating jobs at a slower rate throughout the last 10 years than the surrounding states. Whatever their tax rates, whatever their political differences, whether they have unified government or divided government, Wisconsin's been falling behind. And the reason we're falling behind is because our political system is not responsive to the people. That is because the maps are rigged, and it's time to change that. So, let me conclude with this. They should be ashamed. I think we all think the president should be ashamed of how he talks. We think the leader and the speaker should be ashamed of how they talk about fellow Wisconsinites who live in particular parts of the state. We think they should be ashamed that they haven't held a public hearing, and we think they should be shamed into holding a public hearing. But we recognize that even if they don't put this bill on the floor, because they know it would have to pass, they know that the people are behind this bill. 63% of Republicans, 72% of the public are behind this bill. So even if they don't put the bill on the floor, we're going to keep the pressure on. We're going to keep filling rooms like this one. We're going to be on TV. We're going to be in your communities with town halls. We're going to be knocking on doors. And all across the state for the next year and a half, we're going to make sure that people understand who is rigging the maps and who wants change. You can see them behind us. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to get this done.
Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, you talked a lot about the importance of having bipartisan support, and you praised these three Republicans repeatedly. None of them showed up today. Why couldn't you get at least one of them to come here and talk about why they're supporting?
They must be back in their district working it. The bigger story, I think, is Wisconsin Public Radio did a great story on this. Robyn and I were included in it. And Robyn Voss and Scott Fitzgerald would not even comment because they know they're on the wrong side of this issue. Why they're not here, that's, I can't make them come here. But we're just asking everybody out there in the public, I know Wisconsin Eyes got this on live, call your legislator, tell them to support our bill. This is about moving our state forward. That's our motto, forward.
Did you invite those three?
Everybody's invited. Look at the crowd. The media's here.
Okay, so they didn't know if they're such big supporters, why aren't they here?
I have no idea. You have to ask them. Any other questions?
Democrats had complete control in being into 2011. And every time you introduce this bill, I have to ask the same question. Why couldn't you get it done then? Why is it so important now and not then?
Because it is really important.
It was important then.
And it was important then. And I think the Senate was in agreement to do it. And maybe the other side of the aisle wasn't quite there yet. That's my understanding of it. And that's kind of ancient history. We're about going forward, though.
You had complete control. You don't need the other side of the aisle.
I held the hearing.
Yeah.
Come on up.
I was chair of the committee in 2009-10.
You are?
Jeff Smith,
Senator.
now senator,
Yeah.
and I've come back. This is one of the most important issues, and the reason that I've never gone away and I've come back. We should have gotten it done then. There's clearly we should have gotten it done then. The leaders who were in the way at that time, they're gone. They're not in this building anymore. We held the hearing and took it as far as we could go at that time.
Senator Mark Miller.
I'm Senator Miller. I was one of the authors of the bill back in 2009, 2010, along with Representative Black. It was a leadership issue. As has been indicated earlier, leadership does not like to have fair elections because they want to have the power in their own hands. It's an issue of who has the power in their hands, the people or the leadership of the legislature. It's time to pass this bill so the people get the power back in their own hands.
Let me add something from the perspective of the advocates, right? So I think you're right to say, look, the Democrats had complete control. They should have done the right thing. And I think what the people are saying and what the advocates are saying is, you're damn right. They should have done the right thing. And they didn't because I think they looked ahead and they said, well, maybe we'll get a chance to rig the maps. The reality in Wisconsin is that we have a history of this not being rigged until 2011 in in 1971, it was the first redistricting after the one person, one vote constitutional decisions, and the parties came together and they drew a fair map. In 1980, 1990, and 2000, the parties had split control of the trifecta, and so it went to the courts, and the courts drew a fair map. And so in 2011, it was the first time in Wisconsin's modern history that one party had control of the map drawing process. The first time in the one person, one vote era. And so the Republicans had control. They took full advantage. They didn't just rig the maps, though. They rigged the maps more than any other map had been rigged in the history of the United States, right? Again, that's the data that was shown in the Whitford case. They went farther and deeper and stronger than it had ever gone before. So no one is excusing the decisions of the Speaker and the Majority Leader in 2009 and 2010 for not bringing this bill to the floor, not getting it done, and not making sure that the process was fair in 2011. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't change it now, because we've gone through 10 years of a system in which the people have not been represented, where elections haven't mattered, and where the people's will has not been done on issue after issue.
Any other questions?
Say that this bill is supposed to inject nonpartisan, fair redistricting process, but this oversight committee is named by leadership of both parties. How do you how is that nonpartisan?
The Legislative Reference Bureau have a big part in this. Matt, did you have anything?
You want to talk about the process?
They draw so the maps would be drawn by career civil servants at the Legislative Reference Bureau. There's an oversight committee on top of them, but the oversight committee isn't the one drawing the maps. The Legislative Reference Bureau is similar to what happens in Iowa, where their group that is like the Legislative Reference Bureau draws the maps. So there are also specific criteria, as there are in Iowa, that would prohibit members of the Legislative Reference Bureau from using political demographic data to tilt the maps in one party's favor or in another.
Isn't the ultimate say by partisans on this oversight committee?
There are partisans from both sides on the oversight committee, but they aren't drawing the maps.
But they're directing how the maps will be drawn.
The criteria in the law directs how the maps are drawn.
What is the commission's role then?
Commission's role, other than perfunctory, what?
Public hearings.
Hold public hearings. The advisory commission holds the public hearings.
And we, I think, in the amendment to the Iowa one, there'd be 8 public hearings. The last time they did it, outside of the state capitol, on state computers with state employees, none of us were involved in it at all. We didn't find it, what was going on until it was done. And to me, that system, and that being said, first time, the history of our state since 1970, this was a situation where the mathematical formula for them was unbelievable. They really had an algorithm that worked. You could see it. That's why they ignored the will of the people for so long. That's why the public has to speak out. Totally have to speak out. They have ignored the will of the people on so many issues. The lame duck, the MA expansion, all kinds of other stuff. Dark store loophole. Come on. I mean, this can be fixed if we fix the process, really.
So just to lend a little clarity to that commission is 5 people. 4 of them are assigned by the Speaker, the Minority Leader, the Majority Leader, and the Minority Leader in the Senate. But those 4 have to come together to determine the 5th person, and that 5th person that's determined by those 4 people then becomes the chair of the committee. So just for that clarity in the room.
There's a question in the back.
Question in back?
Over that way, towards right here.
You can just shout it out.
I'd like to know how we can assure that there are public hearings on this legislation. Is there a way that we, the public, can demand that?
In the governor's budget, it was amended from the Iowa model to have 8 public hearings, I understand. 8 public hearings all over the state, not just in Madison, but north of 29. So we're including everybody in the state because, as you can see from the map, they all want this to happen. We can keep making excuses about the past. It's about the future right now. And you got to contact your legislators and let them know. Let's do it. Let's do it for the will of the people. Let's do it for democracy. Let's do it for one person, one vote.
The only way to get the hearings is to call our legislative representatives. Is that the only way we can get this out?
The hearings come after the bill.
I
think they're talking about a hearing for the bill.
We want, Representative Vining talked about that. We need a hearing in the legislature, in the Assembly, and in the Senate.
How do we get that?
Call them. Call the leadership of those committees.
Call the chairs.
Call the chairs.
We can also call all the local county and municipal officials. I'm a trustee for a little village in Ridgeway, and I'm stuck, with, I've been redistricted to be with Fitchburg and far away from where I live now. And people, county clerks are upset. They are in Howard, village of Howard, which was divided into 4 different assembly districts, and over 100 people got the wrong ballots because the lines are so confusing and split things the way they've never been split, and the way people do not live and associate. We have, they're as embarrassed, but when they can't, make sure everybody gets a vote, as anybody, and they have more chance to get to the legislators, so let's talk to our local officials also.
Yeah, that being said, back in 2011 and 12, when redistricted me, 30,000 new constituents, and they changed my map a lot, and the former senator said to me, you can't win. That district's drawn to beat you. And that's the problem with redistrict and what they did then. 30,000 new constituents that we had to get to know.
We've got
And that was designed.
Right here.
If you aren't successful in getting public hearings, would you be willing to consider having some citizen public hearings in every congressional district throughout the state?
We have already done that a lot.
So last session, we held a hearing in Madison to just
Wauwatosa?
and then there've probably been 50 town halls that have been held around the state. I think it's a great idea that in 2021, if the bill hasn't come into effect, that the citizens take the responsibility for holding hearings around the state. But we have to make sure the maps are drawn in a transparent way, right? It has to happen with sunlight, and so hopefully keeping the pressure on, keeping events like this going is what's going to make that happen.
And we'll go to any community, anywhere in Wisconsin, put a town hall together.
Just ask.
Yep. I think you see people up here who are willing to fight this as long as we need to fight it to get it done. We're not ceding any ground right now. But thank you for being here today. It's exciting to be in a full room, and thank you. Woo!